So here's the L shape, just as simple as that. Okay, there it is there. There's the vertical, there's the leg. So it's an L shape that looks like that, isn't it? Now then, there's probably too much water in this photo. So I'll probably crop the water to about here, something like that. So we can make the most of this shape. And this is how simple, this is how straightforward we must be sort of looking at this scene. So once I've got the L shape in like this, we know that there's some trees around the back there, a little hint of greenery over the top in places. There's a row of cottages. It's a little place called Pentuan, not just outside Mevagissey. There's greenery in here as well within this shape. Now there's a whole array of, just move my palette a second before I start painting. There's a whole array of dormer windows and things like that. But for the moment, to see how I just block everything out, everything sits in a, to start off with at least, everything sits in a rectangle or a square. And then I see the roof over here with the angle. So I just cut that into my shape here, or cut it out, whichever way you want to look at it. There's a slight bit of, there's a little bit of perspective line there. I'm just going to get rid of those. So the perspective runs slightly higher on the right, so it runs down to the left like this. I'm not going to get too fussy for the moment with the actual counting of windows and dormers and things like this, dormer windows. But I'm just going to place out, roughly speaking, where they are. Something like this. Nice little triangles on the side of those dormers as they as they sit on the roof, the angle of the roof. So open them up like this. Another one here. I am getting a little bit, I'm probably overworking this at this stage a little bit, but it should be okay. And now windows into here. Before I go putting all those windows in and all the extra detail, I'm just going to make sure I've got everything else in place first. So let's have a look here. I've got windows here, here. Separate building actually here, which just comes into view. Don't know whether I want to include that, but we'll put it there for the moment. So it's an option as to whether we use it or not. Slightly higher line at the top of that roof line, or lower actually, sorry, lower, about there. So windows, evidence of some windows here. Let's do this bottom line. So if this is the water line, that's going to make sure that's nice and horizontal, even if you have to use a ruler, a straight edge. You know, what are we here? About there. Just use, don't be afraid to use a straight edge. Don't make that too heavy a pencil mark. It might be difficult to get off afterwards. And then I'm going to call the height of this little wall here, seems to change height a bit, about there for now. I can always change that if I've underdone that or overdone the measurement of that measurement there. I can always change it. And what sits sort of sandwiched, if you like, inside now are the other buildings. So we know just by a quick, easy study that this little building here sits, look at that, the corner of that little building, it seems to be in line with that one there, doesn't it? So it's a bit of a coincidence. I'll move it slightly to the left, I think, so it doesn't look quite so I don't know, awkward. A little bit of blue wall showing there. There's some windows down here like this. Further evidence of things. I wouldn't even know what they are. They're probably supporting or adjoining walls. Maybe even a wooden fence or something there. If you study the photo closely, you'll get really quite bogged down with what's actually there. There's a little seating bench here. Now, if it works, later we'll use it. But so that what I'm doing, of course, is what I always do, and that's search out the things that I think I want to include, that I think will work, will make the painting look good. And I will leave anything out that I think, falls short of doing that. So some windows up here. Then we get to the bigger houses. There's a little gap there before we join the roof. Probably best if we do this this measurement here before we go looking at the next building. So instead of just doing the next building, which is this one here, I'll look at this shape as the overall big shape right over here to the gable end of another building, of a distant building. So it goes along here, something like this, down here, and then there's that pale cream colored gable end. We can see something like that with further buildings here. But I really want you to try and keep things simple. So there's only two buildings really, I think, here. So one, I'm going to guess, finishes about here. So this one here seems to go from about that measurement of the corner there to somewhere around here, like that. It falls same angle for this lean, that the same angle on that roof there as it is this end. Okay, keep those sort of parallel to each other. There's a dormer again up here, which I'm just going to pencil in very roughly. I'll pencil in the windows to this building roughly. Don't make the windows too small, folks. Even if in real life, even if you're doing a really accurate study. Sorry, I'm just checking something here as I'm talking. I've spotted a fault, a mistake of mine. This corner here should come down lower, because it should be lower there than there. That measurement there should be higher than that measurement there, if we could see it there. So that slope, if there were a line from that corner to that corner, it would go down in that direction to the right hand side. Sorry, yeah, don't make windows too small. Even if the real object, the real property shows a tiny little window, in something like this, if you put tiny windows in, it's all too easy to make the building look like a city building, one of these big office blocks. So make the windows nice and proud and big. Okay. And it was something, the beauty of doing the critiques is I see them as a great opportunity to pick up on things that we all need to perhaps be made aware of. And I noticed in the critique we did of the Rose Cottage, not all of us, but some of us just needed a little pointer in terms of the windows. I do keep my detail to a minimum, you know that, but some of us just put tiny little marks in for the inside the window frames. Now remember, on that occasion, we were looking at a property much closer to us, so the window sort of might have been this big, and we made tiny little marks for the window panes. If you're going to do anything, if you're going to change the size and scale of something like that in a window, make those window panes much larger. Otherwise, they're going to look, it's not going to look terribly inviting. Windows are really, really important things on your buildings. They're the eyes. So make them big and bold and interesting. There's something here. I really can't work that out. It's almost like a part of the a sort of extended area at the top of the building there. Anyway, we'll just put in a shape there and worry about it later. There's a nice large chimney at this stage here, and it does look as though that is a slightly higher roof to its neighbor. So there's the big roof, slight down angle on that chimney front edge at the top there, okay, just as it is on the roof itself. But the chimney side that comes in this direction, that face there, that will go slightly down, okay. It's very subtle. It's easy to overdo that, so be careful. So the same would happen with this one here, this chimney here. The that edge there, that front edge of that chimney stack is almost the same as the same perspective line as the roof ridge itself. So if I was to extend that so you can see what I mean, it does that sort of angle, but the side of the chimney would go across it at an angle going backwards like that. So let's get those out because they're going to look really surreal if I leave them in there. So another quick look at the overall design. Few windows here. Again, probably drawing them in bigger than they really are. Not too worried about the roof line for the moment of this other property. Does seem to fall in line with this nearer one. Does seem to be a continuation of that line. And then it doesn't really matter too much what goes on over here because we're really out of the area by where we need to concern ourselves with detail. You know, down here, that's just going to become an area that we don't have to worry too much about in terms of detail. But now then, so I've got what I need from the photo. So anything else that goes into this painting is going to be purely Howard Jones. You know, it's going to be purely what I want to put in. So there's a lot of greenery around here. I'm going to have that. I'm going to take that. Seems to cascade over this sea wall. I'm going to make use of the reflections, of course, in the water in a vertical fashion like this when we get there. I do like this area up here. It's quite dark. There's some more greenery dotted around. I'll move that slightly over to here. And make sure I've got nice dark windows on this property because it's really, I think if there is a focal point territory in this painting, it's probably here. Okay, it's in the nook of the L shape. It's right in the corner of the L shape down here. So this is what I mean here. Okay. If that's our L shape in there like that, is that, then the focal point sits right here in this corner. So, and the thing about, while we're on the subject matter of focal points, remember rules must be broken will be broken from time to time. So, you know, it is possible to produce paintings by where the focal point is not obvious, or it teeters towards being in the wrong place, perhaps a little too central sometimes. But you can only get away with that if everything else is in balance. And sometimes that's a hard thing to put your finger on. Why one painting where the focal point is not where it, not in one of the 4 spots still works. So do you know, do bear that in mind. I will always stick by the rules of the importance of a focal point. I think, you know, they always bring balance. It's not to say I haven't produced paintings where the focal point isn't as obvious as they are in some of my other paintings. So just bear it in mind, folks. Right, I think I'm sort of ready to go. You know, with only a few other things to sort of think about as we get towards the end of the painting, like there are some vertical telegraph posts. My drawing looks quite complex. If you look at the sketch that I sent out, where's it gone? If you look at the sketch that I sent out for this, it's probably a little more detailed than some other weeks that we've done. Yeah, it's on the back there. But it's, you know, there's a little bit more there perhaps than there would normally be. And that's only because I'm trying to get our minds working towards the simple L shape. Using the simple L shape, but putting plenty of information in at the same time. So it's not just about, you can't just put an L shape in and expect it to make sense, but you've got to be able to see that L shape in the design quite clearly when, you know, and it's something you'll spot yourselves the more familiar you become with it. Right. Okay, let's get some paint going. I'm going to start with the obvious and start with the sky. So I just put out a bit of fresh paint, some ultramarine blue and some cerulean blue. And I might even just pick up a little bit of phthalo green in this sky. This, you know, it's worth making something of that sky. I'm starting with a large mop. Let's just get something up here. Now, we're in a different place today, folks, in terms of drying time, okay? Not that long ago, I was wishing that the weather outside would warm up, and trust me, it really makes a difference to your drying time. When the room that you're working in is warm, you have to be ready for that. You have to be ready to tackle it because things will dry out much quicker. I'm going to just warm that up a little bit with a little bit of cadmium yellow, a little bit of raw sienna to just lower part of that sky while everything's still wet back there. Now, as long as you don't move that yellow around too much, you won't get a green. We all know that blue and yellow make green, but they only make the green if you thoroughly mix them together. If you can just run through the blue with as few brush marks as possible, you'll get a certain amount of green effect, yes. But the keeping your brushwork to a minimum will keep that from going into a yellow rather than a nice warm. Sorry, keep it from going into a green rather than what it should be, which is a nice warm yellow color at the base of the sky. Right, okay. We can, at the same time here, develop this background. Now, it's too wet to do the finished work on the background, but I'm just going to go over the houses, cut around the houses with the same two colors, more or less, ultramarine blue, raw sienna, cadmium yellow. So it's, as I say, this area that I'm painting right now, which is the backdrop, the greenery, it's too wet to get it to where I really want it to be. So we'll just put something in for now. And as it is greenery that we're creating, remember we've got plenty of this going on around the properties, the houses like this. I'm just dotting them in places. So we'll come back to the fields in the background in a moment. So, you know, if you can, get yourself to follow this green shape that runs right through the painting. It comes from the background, as you just saw me paint, into in front of some of these buildings. It pops up here, it pops up here, it pops up along the ground where the bench is down here. Changing it, mind you, I'm just adding more cadmium yellow in the grassy area, okay? And I'm just glancing up at my photo reference for ideas. There's a darker area back here. Now I'm probably not going to do the darker greens until this paler grassy green is dry, because you know what's going to happen. The dark's going to leach into that lovely sunlit grass area, and it's not going to look like a sunlit grass area anymore. So you'll have to wait for that to dry before you can paint the darker green bushes at the back of it. So there's what cascades over the wall here in a very random fashion like this. I might need to dry brush some of this in a moment. It goes all the way off, increasing, if you like, thinking all the time about that L shape. Look how that line of greenery there points out, you know, really establishes the L shape. Now, if this green somehow magically traveled down here, down there, something like that, then you can see how the L shape continues up here. Okay. I'm going to speed dry this because the shapes that I've made, I want to keep as they are, with the exception of, I'm just going to make the line at the bottom of the wall quite strong. And the reason why I do that is so that, I'll tell you what these colors are now. The reason why I do that is because when I come to do the reflections, I can use this strong dark paint that I'm about to put on at the bottom of the wall to pull down as reflections. Now then, I'm using ultramarine blue, raw sienna, but this time, and a bit of cadmium yellow, but this time I'm adding a bit of alizarin crimson, because the alizarin crimson, the addition of that will make that green much darker and a little bit warmer. So there it is. Point of this lovely brush goes along here, nice and broken. Whatever you do, don't do a solid line. Nice broken line like that. You know, there are other bits in the wall in places equally as dark. And that also, of course, does the same thing of increasing the L shape. So once you've established how much detail you want to put in the painting, your thoughts should return on a, you know, regularly to the design, to that L shape. I'm just taking the opportunity while I've got this slightly darker mix in the brush to dot and dab some of those darker areas in the greenery behind. Let's say I probably will need to go back into the fields later. But if I can do a little bit now, as things are drying off, if you're inclined to paint a little bit slowly, and there is nothing wrong with painting, you know, at a slower speed, then if you want to try and make yourself develop a slightly faster painting, the process, if you want to speed that up, painting in hot weather is perfect, because you have to, as things dry out. And I'm convinced this is why a lot of those the big names in around the world in watercolor, the likes of Alvaro Castañer, Joseph's book, which these people live in hot climates. And I think it's got a lot to do, the way they paint has got a lot to do with the climate that they live and work in, they paint in. You have to paint quickly. So a little bit of darkness there. Anyway, I'm going to speed dry this. Just clean my brush off before I pick up the hairdryer. That's mostly dry now. It's dry enough for me to rest my hand on. So I'm going to go for the smaller brush, and we'll start looking at the smaller brush and the rigger. I'll have the rigger at the ready as well. So let's leave the rigger brush there. Let's start with this small round brush, and I'm going to pick up ultramarine here and a bit of burnt sienna this time, okay, as opposed to raw sienna, which is what we were using a moment ago. And this is almost a dry brush mix. This is the type of mix here that I'm doing that's very close to what I do when I use the pickle jar to isolate it from water. It's probably got a little bit more water in it than a true dry brush mix. And with this, I'm just looking to slightly more carefully place my dark window panes. Not really thinking about the structure that those window panes are encompassed within. I'm just thinking about the window panes themselves. Okay. There's a little line above, but we can make more of that later. We can just dry brush. Do make sure that these lines that when you're running down the side of your roof and along the roof edge, do make sure that that's breaking, that paint is breaking, the line is breaking, okay? And another one I feel I have to mention on a regular basis is not to put, other than a little corner area like that on the vertical corner, don't take a line down the corner of your building, okay? It doesn't exist. These corners, especially the ones facing us, actually it goes for the ones furthest away from us too, but they're exposed to so much light. You don't see, you have to know, of course, where that corner is, and you can leave a pencil line there, and you can erase that pencil line afterwards when the painting is finished. So otherwise you need to know where that corner is, because otherwise you'll be placing your windows in the wrong place. But whatever you do, don't run a hard solid line down the vertical corners. As a rule of thumb, you really need to be thinking vertical corners, vertical changes of angle really should stay out of. And if you think about it, there's a reason. It's because anything horizontal or even slightly horizontal, diagonal, offers shadow. So there'll be a shadow under something there, because the light, of course, comes usually from above, or at least, from an angle. So there'd be shadow under that. There wouldn't be shadow on a vertical corner. There's no shadow there. So why put a line down there? But for some reason we do. I think it's because we feel the need to delineate the shape. So try to get out of that habit if you can, folks. All it's required, as I say, often is just a little nick there at the top to show you that there's a change of angle. Same goes for the chimneys, a small amount, say, just there, something like that. But those lines should be the reserve for what's horizontal and diagonal only. Just reloading my brush here. Probably a little bit too much water in this. Let's put a few of these windows in again. Now, there's an interesting thing, because it does, it'll always sound like there's contradictions here. So if I don't put, if you're looking at a surface that receives a lot of light, why do we need sometimes to put a line along the top of the roof? Because also that must be hit with a lot of light. Would you expect to find a line there? Well, I think we do, because typically all buildings have a line of different tile on the top, a crest, a ridge tile, and that creates a shadow. It creates a line, it creates an edge, and you will see it when you're looking at buildings. So that line there, that angle, okay, I might put a mark or two on it, something like that, but no more than that, for the same reasons. It doesn't have a ridge tile. It's not, there's no shadow on offer on that angle, that at the end of that roof there. So it must remain mostly without any line work on it. Now, I'll just speed up a little bit here. Interesting that some of these windows look like largish horizontal panes, and the others over here have a more vertical design to them. Maybe a shadow line there, shadow line there, shadow line there. Probably a shadow line in the upper right, sorry, upper left corner of that window area, like that. Make a little bit more of that roof line there. And there's something going on that looks like a window or a doorway here. Just all the time, just glancing up at my photo reference to see the shapes. I may have moved those shapes on the wall a bit, but what I am doing is making sure that the line of perspective is good. So two windows on the same type of wall will be at windowsills will be on that same angle of converging line, perspective line. Now, the little building, let's move down here for a moment. I can come back up here if I feel as I've left something out later. Come back to it later if I've left something out. Some nice chunky windows down here, something like this. Shapes down the side. Not sure what those are. I don't think they're windows, but they're very similar to the window shapes. A couple of weeks ago, you remember we were looking for shapes, similar shapes repeated throughout the design, throughout the painting. And that's sort of what I'm doing now. I don't think those two marks there are windows, but they look the same as window shapes. So just keep repeating it. Okay. Just all the time, I'm just using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And if either of those two colors dominate, it's probably the, at this stage anyway, the ultramarine blue. Slightly less of the burnt sienna in the mix. Chimney. Much just moving up down the street here, so relatively speaking the windows will get smaller, but relatively speaking for the house itself they're quite big still. Not absolutely sure what goes on down there. Seems to be a chimney and other bits and pieces. Getting into the zone area down there, of course, where it doesn't matter too much. I'm going to put a little bit of cerulean blue in this. So The reason why I then went to cerulean blue into this mix that I'm using is because the cerulean blue is slightly more opaque, offering a more of a distant look about it. There's that, whatever this thing is in the wall. I almost didn't put this in, if I'm honest, this, what I'm talking about here, sorry. This shape here, I almost didn't put that in because you can sometimes put things in, feel as though you have to put something in your painting. It's never going to work. No matter how good you are at painting it and reproducing what it is that you're looking at, it's just not going to work in a painting. It's just going to confuse your viewer because it's not a photo, it will be questioned. That's the nature of, you know, as human beings. It's we need things. We need things to be pretty obvious sometimes. Right. If I've got to do more of this, I will in a moment. But now I'm looking at, as soon as I'm putting in windows and recesses and random shapes in dark dry brush, then I might as well look at the same sort of dark random dry brush work in this wall here. Okay. So without really changing, I might just add a little bit of raw sienna to this mix, okay? Go back to the ultramarine blue with raw sienna. That'll make this area in the greenery a little bit lighter, not much, but just a little bit lighter. And of course, I could also use the cerulean blue as well. And where does this live? It's sort of, what I'm doing here is suggesting that these are the dark micro shadows of the overhanging greenery down the wall. So I've not put the lovely warm brown color of the wall in yet. I'm thinking only of the foliage, the greenery, and the shadows of that greenery. So it sits mostly at the bottom of the green shape, because the green shape is the greenery with sun on it. And what I'm doing now is the greenery that's not got sun on it. It's a shadowy, shady pattern. By using the same, repeating the same texture, I bring this wall, I establish the fact that this wall is one piece, because it all has the same message, has the same texture, has the same colors. The only thing that's missing from it at the moment is the lovely warm color that's in that wall, which we'll do in a moment. So again, if I can use this mix, remember I said at the back of this little lawn area, this grassy area, there's some darker shrubs. Just picked up a little bit of cadmium yellow, and I'm just creating that slightly, I'm alternating between a dark shapes and slightly more colorful shapes. So now I'm hoping you can see that flat yellow that we did in the initial stages is not confused with the shrubs and things that are growing vertically out the ground. That area is flat. That's grass. That there is grass, because we made it with a simple horizontal brush stroke, and what's going on behind is so different. You know, it suggests of the hedgerow. Okay, careful I don't go getting too carried away here with this. Even though that's drying very quickly, because one, it's very warm in this room, and two, it's a dry mix. So that's more dry. I'm still going to make absolutely sure it is all dry. I'll just run the hairdryer over it. The next thing we should be thinking about is what's left. I mean, there's the wall, there are the roofs. Now, my eye says, my eye is sending a message to my brain saying, oh, isn't there some similarity in color here? You know, look at the color of those roofs, look at the color of the wall. It's definitely a very close relationship there, but in terms of color, tone, and temperature. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix up a color. I'm going to go back to the big brush here, the big mop brush. And I'm going to mix up a warm, reddy brown. So I've got some already here. That actually is my green mix. But I'm going to turn it into what I'm seeing in the wall. So what I need to do that is put some alizarin crimson in there, okay? Then some raw sienna in there. And we get something very close to that wall color. Even if it's not exactly the same color as the roofs, it's quite close. So yeah, I think that's pretty close. I'm just going to try I have a piece of tissue in my hand just in case I don't like it. If I don't like it, the tissue can take it off. I'm just going to run a couple of shots across this wall here. It'll have to vary. I'll put something in it very quickly to change it. And I think I'll put a little bit of yellow in there. So I'm adding a bit of yellow into the mix I just picked up. And perhaps there, here somewhere. That yellow. Now also, just to further improve the texture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some water in places. So as I speak to you here, I'm cleaning that big brush, but I've put it back in the water once cleaned, and I've left some water in the brush. Okay, it's not dripping wet, but it'll allow me to deliver water, which will give a nice texture to that wall. And any lines that are happening, that are occurring here, because it's very dry, if I don't like them, I'll just tease them off like this. Okay. Lift off in places maybe. There are areas in this wall that are getting a lot of light by about here. So this now thirsty brush, there's no water left in this brush now, is just lifting areas out off the paper. So I did say that the roofs were quite close to this color. So they seem to be a little more, it's a difficult one to call, but you can at least sort of see that they have a bit of pinkiness about them. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of cerulean blue, a bit of alizarin crimson. Okay, so that's my base color, because I see this pinky sort of pinkiness to it. But then to get it more like the roof color, I'll add a little bit of raw sienna in there. And again, I'll have this at the ready. If something goes on my painting I don't like, it comes off. So let's start with this building here. Something like that. Now, I don't want to completely cover that roof, because you only got to look at the photo. It isn't a flat color. There's light around here, darkness over there. So what I do is I just deliver the color that I just mixed to roughly where I think it appears on the roof. But with this other brush, doesn't really matter which brush, you can just manipulate and distribute the color. Okay, so notice though that there is a bit of water in this little brush. Notice that my brush doesn't land in the paint, it lands where there isn't any paint. So that allows me to tease into those deliveries, the delivery areas, and keep a nice, interesting texture up there without going silly, without spending ages doing it. There. even though if you think you can see a color, this probably isn't really there, okay? But for some reason, I'm seeing yellow. I'm just going to put a little bit of yellow up here. If you think you can see it, put it in. So just to repeat this, I'll do this a bit more quickly now. Just to repeat, I'll deliver something up here on this smaller building. I'll take the small brush again. Maybe this time I'll pick up a little bit of cerulean blue. Okay, there's my little bit of cerulean blue, and I'll land it where there's no other paint. So it lands in the middle. That's its own separate little delivery. And then I'm cleaning the brush again. So there isn't any paint in this little brush, but I'll work from the white areas into the other areas that I've delivered, and I'll leave it like that and see how it develops. The little building itself is pale blue, so I might just pop a little bit of that around the place, deliver it, clean the brush, get the paint out of the brush, and then manipulate it, distribute it. Got to be careful though, not to make contact with the paint that's on the roof, because you'll lose all your shape completely. So don't make contact with the roof when you're doing this. If you want to be really safe, don't do what I'm doing. Wait till that roof is dry and then paint the color of the local color of the wall of the house. Okay. Now there are random little pop-ups of colors and things in places. And what they are, they look something like this. Probably actually shadow things. Let's do the other roofs. So as I move down onto this roof, I think things should go a little bit more, despite, sorry, they should go a little cooler, despite the photo saying otherwise. If anything, the photo says that the furthest roof is redder, i.e. warmer, than its neighbor. But again, that's a bit like, you know, changing scale of things to make them work, or leaving things out. I'm going to go cool rather than warm. But I just made a delivery of something similar to this, but with more of the cerulean blue in it. I made the delivery, and now I will distribute it around a bit like this. Now the chimney stacks are nice and warm. So I'll take a little bit of cadmium red, bit of burnt sienna, and we'll give them their local color, which of course, as you can see from the photo, is red. There's a chimney that I didn't draw in, but we could just hint upon it with a bit of colored paint there. Seems to be a hint of red up here on that chimney. So let's do the roof of this area up here. Warming it up slightly because we're coming, you know, back towards us a bit. I'll put a little bit of cadmium red in this, but essentially that is still just that pinky color. Deliver, avoid the dormers perhaps, and with the small brush, just move it around a bit. If you want to add a little bit of yellow or even a bit of red into that in places, you know. Nice and loose, everything really nice and loose. And don't be afraid to leave little pockets of white. There'll be some places where you shouldn't leave white. Sometimes when we have to delineate the shape of something, we need to paint right up to a line or an edge, just so that we can make sense of what we're looking at. I'm going to take some light out of there, out of that roof. So this little brush that I'm using, I've dunked in water and squeezed all the water back out so it's clean and thirsty. Right, again, oh, there's an area down here I feel as I should do something about right now. I can just borrow paint. There was nothing in this brush other than water. So I'm just going to scrub around that area and lose that corner down there, borrowing paint from the neighboring edges. There's a bit of blue down there. Perhaps I shouldn't do this because it's not really a place I want to attract people's attention, but blue's a cool color. At least it will push it back. Now I'm going to speed dry this again. Or shall I? Just a second. I think what I might do is just complete the background fields. So a bit of